thrilled to kick off another roundtable. I think this is Entech's 9th, and it's Show Me the Money, Finding Funding for Your Projects. Acronyms, Zach! We did do a short prep just to make sure everyone's Zoom worked back on Tuesday, and at that point, there's all these acronyms. And I'm like, oh my God. If you're not into this stuff, it's hard to remember them all. So everyone out there in the audience, 15 minutes ago, I emailed you that sheet, so which looks just like the screen save right now. So you do have it available as a cheat sheet as we go through this. So it'll make things a little easier because I'm sure a lot of our panelists will slide into these acronyms. So first, I want to get started by introducing our panel. And first of all, I'm Christine Gonzalez, storage tank queen at Entech Engineering. And so for the formal occasions, I always wear my crown. And today was so formal because Natalie made me this beautiful sash. So it's my storage tank queen sash. So I'll be your moderator today. Natalie O'Connor is a project manager at Entech Engineering, and she works out of our Pottsville office. She has 33 Penn Best projects under her belt with 20 years of experience in the industry. Tori Morgan, while she's new to Entech, she isn't new to the industry. She's our compliance coordinator and senior project manager, and she has 30 years of experience. One reason I love the way our panels work is because we get a variety of viewpoints, and we love featuring our industry friends. We've got Kurt Fontaine. He's the manager of operations engineering at the Municipal Authority of Westmoreland County. He's got 34 years of experience, and you see him at all the AWWA state and regional conferences. Scott Graber, he's the borough administrator at the borough of Schuylkill Haven. He's a client of Entech's. And actually, I forgot to ask you this, Scott, how many years of experience do you have?
I have 24.
24, okay. Michael Angerson, he's a consultant for Entech Engineering, semi-retired, and he focuses on RUS, which is Rural Utilities Service, when it comes to those sorts of funding. Tommy Holmes, I'm thrilled he's joining our panel. He's the legislative director with AWWA. That stands for, use your cheat sheet, American Water Works Association. So he's responsible for the creation of the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. Is it WIFIA? Am I saying it right?
WIFIA is what we call it. And I was part of a bigger team. I was just one component of a big team.
No. You did it all. You told me you did it all on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
Nice clarification. And we've got Scott Kramer, a managing director at RBC Capital Markets in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And 50% of their work is for securing loans, refinancing for water and wastewater clients. Did I get everyone on the panel? Because this is probably the biggest panel we've had. Okay, excellent. So before we move forward with questions from the audience, oh yay, I see some more coming in, excellent. We always like to hear from our audience. We want to know what is most important to you guys, so it helps us to focus our discussion and make sure we're covering your biggest concerns. So just released poll, and it's what are your biggest struggles in finding funding? And you can pick two, so we can know what to focus on. So we're looking at things like knowing what programs for which you're eligible. This is something I always wonder about, getting support from local politicians and representatives. Like I've got to wonder, when it comes to work, so often it's who you know. So is it same deal when you're trying to get funding? Is it who you know? Can that help? Does the board not want to raise your rates? So that really makes it hard to have some money available. Or just a bigger picture, understanding which grants and loans are best for different projects. So for my audience, I'll give you another 10 seconds, and this will once again help us to focus in on what's important to you guys. And again, feel free to be submitting questions throughout this event through the Q&A. And let's see what the results are. So I'll share the results with everyone out there in the audience. So it looks like the number one was knowing what programs for which you're eligible. Okay, and that was actually something Natalie had suggested would be a high priority one. And second one was understanding which grants and loans are best for different projects. Okay, and third was the board. Okay, so this really, really helps us. So thank you, audience, for helping us out with that. So to kick things off, question, actually, here's a question for Natalie.
No.
I know, so you ready? Something I heard when it comes to getting loans, getting grants, go big or go home. And it's apparently a quote that Ed Petrosky from our Mountaintop office uses regularly, and recommended to our client, Carol Paul out in Greenville, hey, go big or go home. So essentially, if you're gonna put the time into it, go big, take care of the big projects. What's your experience? Do you think that's good advice?
I think that's great advice. The amount of time that you put into an application, into sometimes closing, into reimbursements, you're better off getting as much bang for your buck. So I definitely agree. Anything, if you're going to put the effort into it, go big or go home. I totally agree with Ed. So
yeah, I would chime in with Natalie. You know, it's much easier as a funding agency, you know, whenever you submit an application for maybe what I hate to call it, but, you know, sometimes we call it wish list items, it's easier to include them with your project. And then maybe if the funding doesn't turn out to be as successful as what you planned, then it's much easier to always scale a project down than it is to scale one up.
Tori.
Yeah, I'll just kind of expand on the go big or go home concept and really kind of look at it globally too when it comes to grants and funding. It, you know, it's not it should never be a reactive, it should be proactive, meaning, you know, as projects come up for your facility, unless it's an emergency, obviously, situation, you should be doing a little pre-planning, putting some money aside. The community should, if they can, for matching, if it's a matching grant, and also knowing what kind of big projects are coming up. So just like Natalie and Dave said, the go big, go home thing is if you can combine some things together, pre-plan, make sure that you understand the projects that are coming up for you, so that as you're going out and looking for grants, you have the time and resources to put it all together and hopefully get that funding. It's really important to start thinking ahead a little bit. And sometimes that means from a budgetary standpoint, if you know your project has a very large capital project coming up, maybe you want to start planning, thinking to yourself, well, this grant might apply in coordination with another project that site is doing, and look at the money you might have to put aside to, if it's a matching grant, things like that. It's just a planning thing that I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, good idea. Mike?
Yeah, and I tend to agree with everybody here that, yeah, you need to do that. Like Tori said, if you got a big project, let's do it and get it over with, because the longer you wait on it, the more it's going to cost you in the end. And I've seen that happen many, many times over 40 years of lending. So get everything done, get it all done at once and get it over with.
Scott?
Yeah, leaving your options open is extremely important. Many grant applications, we all know that, you know, there's $100 million of grant money available, and there's 1 billion of grant applications put in. So if you leave your options open and convince your board to say, we need to, maybe they're saying it's a 50% grant, but maybe it isn't in the end. Maybe when they get all those applications, it could be a 25% grant. And so you need to convince your board to have that option. Do you want to get some grant money or no grant money? So having those plans and engineering design bid specs on the table is really good, because you have it done and you have it ready for the next opportunity.
Good point. Other input from you guys in regards to go big? Tommy?
Well, I was thinking it's kind of like applying for a job. Pay attention to the goals and purposes of the program. And what I've been thinking is during the campaign, President-elect Biden stressed climate change and environmental justice a great deal when he was talking about the environmental realm. So if I was applying for a federal loan or grant in the coming years, next 4 to 8 years, I would look to include some aspect of how this project addresses climate change and resilience to climate change, and to what degree it takes care of environmental justice issues, people in minority neighborhoods who have been subjected to more pollution and things like that. I mean, you might want to expand the project to include things like that.
Ooh, good point. I like that idea a lot. Excellent. Kurt.
Okay, so I think it depends upon the scope of your project too, because some of the programs actually limit the amount of money you can borrow. There's a minimum and a maximum. I think DCED, the most recent round of small water and wastewater projects, had that, and I don't remember exactly what the parameters were. I believe it might have been 30,000 on the lower end and 300 or 500,000 on the high end, but there wasn't much money to go around the state. Now, whenever we did Penvest projects, we used to bundle those. We do line extensions out at the ends of our system at the request of municipalities and the residents. And we'd bundle maybe 5 or 6 of those projects to try to get it up close to $1 million. So that's the go big or go home aspect of it.
Okay, interesting. Tori, did you have something?
No, I was just, when Kurt said 3 or 5, it was 5. So I was just throwing up the 5.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I did want to just reference, another thing that's important, that the go big and go home concept, but also just keeping a pulse on those regulations that are coming down the pike. Normally, and Tommy can probably speak to this even more so, as regulations change and become effective, usually the grant opportunities are right behind them, because there's a mandate to have something. Not always, some of them aren't always funded. They're unfunded mandates, but some of them, like for instance, the new lead and copper rule and the lead line replacement, certainly an area, it's going to cost communities a lot of money. There are many grant programs out there right now, and communities should be planning. They should be looking at it, even though the rule is not final yet. I don't know, it should be any day. Hopefully, well, not hopefully, but just to kind of get some clarity. I think that's what we're looking for. There are grant opportunities out there for like lead line replacement. And I think some of these grants, and Natalie can probably speak to this more so than me, they're full grants, like that. It's 100% covered. So if you have, a project that is ready to do these lead line replacements and the grants are out there, the suggestion is get on it, start working towards it now, because that money won't be available forever, and it is available now. So being aware of those regulations and how they impact your facility is key, because the money does become available.
The stupid question, I always forget this. If you get a grant, do you have to pay it back?
No.
Natalie?
No.
It's free money? You just get free money?
Free money.
With conditions. I mean,
Some
generally,
of them are matching.
yeah, usually there's stuff like you have to comply with Davis-Bacon wage laws and get all kinds of environmental permits lined up. You don't pay a grant back, but you get federal money, you get federal conditions.
Mike?
The one exception to that, Tommy, is if you borrow through RUS, you're not subject to Davis-Bacon.
Okay.
As long as there are no other federal funds put into that project.
Yeah.
For instance, a lot of communities sometimes want CDBG money. And I used to tell them, forget the CDBG. If you can get CDBG for individual homeowners to hook into the system, that's fine. But if you put CDBG money into the actual construction of the project, it kicks everything from state prevailing wage rates right into federal wage rates.
I've heard the USDR RUS loans it's a much more streamlined process than an EPA, SRF, or other type of grant.
Yeah, well, I think the thing with RUS is that you have local people who are there. You're not dealing with an office in Philadelphia. You've got field offices, 6 of them throughout the state. So at least you can go somewhere and talk to a warm body. Can I expand one thing on what Scott said? And sometimes I consider it a little radical. Scott talked about grants. For instance, there may be $1 billion of applications and $1 million only of grants out there. So the competition is tough. Sometimes I think if you want to keep going after grants for major projects and you're not getting them, sometimes it might be better to just take a loan and bite the bullet, because the longer you keep, again, it goes back to the longer you keep waiting, the more that project cost increases. And then the grant you were going after, you're no further ahead than what you were if you just took the loan in the first place.
Interesting. And Natalie?
Yes, they also, instead of grants, Christine, sometimes they get a little fancy and they call it principal forgiveness. So that's also a grant. So a lot of times people ask me, what's principal forgiveness? So that's kind of just a good little tip. And also, the more we do grant applications and get offers, I think we find that there's a sweet spot for how much you want to apply for. Different grant programs, you know, you can look at the history of what was awarded in the past and kind of find out what kind of project do they seem to award most? Is it somebody asking for the full amount, or is it, you know, something maybe halfway so that they can get the money out to more people? So just something to think about when you're doing your applications.
And Natalie, I mean, you've been doing this for 20 years. Would you say the longer you've been doing it, like the better you get, right? And fine tuning what to do for certain clients?
Yeah, you really find out what can raise some eyebrows in your application and what can give you some more points and make it a little bit more attractive for your clients. So definitely, I learned this kind of stuff all the time. Actually, Scott and I have worked on a few applications and we're successful. And Scott taught me a bunch of stuff that, I wasn't aware of. So always something new. And there is those like buzzwords and things, just like Tommy was talking about, to include in your applications.
Okay. Tori?
Natalie hit on a great point. If you have a particular project and you're looking at a particular grant, go in and look at the history on that grant. I don't know, most of them, if not all of them, have some sort of a history. They show who received the grants in the previous year. They tell a little bit about the project. And I can't emphasize enough too, if you're working alone on that and you need to get some more information, they usually have a contact person. I know sometimes it's hard to get a hold of a live body, but when you do, hold on to that person and have them help you through that process as much as you can, because that can be very, very helpful in putting together the grant application. So good point, Natalie. Yeah.
Okay. Dave, you had a comment?
Yeah, the one thing that I would mention to the group is that from what I found historically, and this has been from all sides of the table, either as an engineer or as working for a funding agency, and even recently working with my local municipality, trying to help get some money for a sewer project in my township. Probably the best thing to do is kind of what you all have mentioned is, but reach out to the different programs. Reach out to them early and often. There's a lot of these projects take many years to sometimes develop. And if I'm aware of a particular project that maybe some municipality has in the planning stage, often I'm able to go back to them and say, hey, did you ever fund your sewer project? Because there's this new special initiative that's coming up. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. So I always stress, reach out early and reach out often with funding agencies, because a lot of times they can help maybe guide you to, more current programs, programs that might be ready based upon where you're at in the project stage.
Okay. Dave, I noticed it looks like you're on the surface of the sun right now. You're really, really bright.
Yeah, the sun unfortunately shining in my window, so I'll try to back up.
Probably because it's next to Scott Graver too.
I know. So yeah, so we got Scott Graver in witness protection and Dave on the sun. Dave, if there is, okay, yeah, that helps a little bit. Okay. Or if there's any way to pull like a shade over it, that might help as well. Okay, do you know what? We've got a bunch of questions in from our audience, so I want to start kicking those out to our panel. So the first one comes in from Betty Evans, and she asks, is there funding available for a camera system to help find I&I? Who has a sense of yay or nay, or how she could get funding for something like that? Anyone? Yes, Scott Graver.
Well, actually, the bad news is, no, there's not a lot of funding available for that because of what the panelists said here earlier. It's such a small project that, you know, it depends how big of a system you want, but, you know, it's probably not even approaching $100,000. So that could be difficult, but DCD, CFA, they have those grants out there. You could still try for it. That kind of application wouldn't be too hard to put together. It's worth it, but there's very few out there for that.
Okay, Natalie?
I'm going to say most of the grant programs want you to fix something, not just investigate. So I think that's where that's probably where the hangup is, and that's a tough one to find funding for. But yeah, I think they all want to see results and something actually fixed. So, but you can certainly use that. You could buy that camera system, use it to find all the problems, and then go get funding to fix all the problems that you find. I guess that's the bright side, but I'm not aware of anything that would fund that easily.
Okay, any other comments on that question? Okay, another question from our audience. Carol Paul, so lovely to see you from out in Greenville. Carol asks, will Dave Henning tell us the 2021 application dates for PennVest funding?
Okay, well, yes, we're currently, I want to say right now we're in mid-cycle. The next application cutoff, and again, the way PennVest works is that we have 4 funding rounds per year. We have an application cutoff, and then we have a corresponding board meeting date, and those 2 dates are typically 3 months apart. So the next application cutoff date is February 3rd, 2021 for an April 21st, 2021 board meeting. After that, May 5th, 2021. And unfortunately, that's where we get to the point where in April, our board meets and we'll set the rest of the meeting dates for the next fiscal year. But typically in May, we would have a board meeting, like say mid-July. Then the next application cutoff after that would be in August for an October board meeting. And then the final round is typically November for a January board meeting.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for that. Always good to get updates from the guys who know it. So another question from our audience. This comes from Michael Keffer. He asks, must matching funds for Pennsylvania DCED water fund application be cash in a project amount? So I have no idea what any of that means. Does anyone in our audience understand the question?
It's my experience that you have to provide a commitment letter, and it has to be 15% of the total cost. Typically, they'll give you up to 85% of the project cost, and you have to have provide source for the balance of that cost.
Okay. Natalie, did you have a comment?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, excellent. Got a question. This is a good one. Betty Evans has posed several questions, and one of them is, does anyone in the panel have a list they could share to get a newbie started with grants? And I will pose that question to Tori.
Who did you say it was, Christine?
This is Betty Evans.
Oh, Betty Evans, I'm gonna be your new best friend soon. I am working on that list with my good friend below us, Mike Angerson. We are putting together a list of grant and funding opportunities, just some general information for people to be able to refer to. And shortly, within the next few weeks, we'll be putting together an informational bulletin board through Entech, and all of that information will be available there. So I will promise to get you that information as soon as it is available, and it should be very, very soon. Absolutely. You'll love it.
And Betty says, yay, I need a new best friend. So, I mean, honestly, that's the magic of these panels, pulling people together who don't know each other at the start, but it's like we're best friends afterwards. So it's really, really cool to be able to do that. Anyone else on the panel? As I mentioned, Corey, I know, is putting together the bulletin board and a list. What resources do you guys use to sort of get an overall view of what all is out there and what are you eligible for? Kurt, I'll start with Kurt. Kurt, what do you guys normally do?
Well, lately we've taken out bond issues, but we just recently did get an RUS grant to put in a sequential batch reactor system up at our Avamore wastewater plant. That was originally built, I don't even know how long ago, but we did get, $1.8 million in grant money, 1.5 million in loan, and then we have to chip in 200,000. But the downside to that was it took approximately 2+ years to get that through the system. So we take a look at the project itself, and then try to match the available financing to that.
Okay.
Okay, and a lot of it, as somebody said earlier too, I mean, as Dave indicated, I mean, there are certain deadlines for certain applications or certain financial means, and there are others that just come around every once in a while.
Okay. Scott, how do you and Natalie figure out which ones to go after?
Well, the bond market is really attractive for the last year, and we explored different funding, including RUS, and we thought the bond market, and actually one of the panelists, Scott Kramer, was part and parcel to this project, and we refinanced existing debt and used the bond market to finance what is hopefully, I hope to see, a $5 or $5.5 million wastewater treatment plant upgrade. It's currently out for bid, with bids coming in next month. But the market was so lucrative that that was the way to go. It reduced a lot of the strings attached, I guess you could say, that comes with government agencies. And we were able to negotiate, because this is such a long project, probably 3 years, we were actually able to negotiate a very nice, attractive interest rate for our bond money. So we really, I don't want to say we're breaking even, but we're pretty darn close to the money we're using, and have that secured. So that's one of the things that we did, and it worked out for us.
Yeah, so Scott Kramer, interest rates, do they continue? You did a presentation for Entech about 6 months ago, and the interest rates were like all the way down here. And so the question is, well, will they stay there? And just like, what are you seeing out there? Like, I know you can't tell the future.
Yes, I don't have that crystal ball for sure. But I would start with what Tori said a few minutes ago. You know, the most successful projects that we see are those projects that you spend a lot of time preparing for, thinking about, not just the bigger project, but if there is a bigger project, how do I bring along some of the smaller I&I projects that come along with it? You have 3 years to spend the money, so be thinking about all the things around the system that that you can roll into a larger financing. To your point, interest rates are at historical lows. You know, we probably see them staying here for some period of time through the COVID-19 mess that we're in. You know, the expectation for long-term interest rates is that we'll be here for some time. The interest rate market does have a unique way of getting ahead of good things coming down the road. So as we get signs that a vaccine's coming and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, interest rates will start moving up ahead of that. So I think your window of opportunity, to Scott Graver's point, is, you know, he's really good at finding the bottom of the market and you know, finding the cheap money, the free money, and you know, again, that leads to a very successful project the more you're thinking about and getting ahead of those kinds of things.
give me a sense of the time frame. Let's say today I went to you and said, hey, I've got existing, loans and money and stuff, but I've got a $5 million project I want to do. So for example, we could take Scott's project from start to finish. How long does it take to get all the paperwork taken care of and that loan in place?
Well, the actual financing, you can be into the market and have money in hand in 90 days pretty easily, probably faster if you wanted to. It's really more about, design, where are you in the process with a lot of the folks on the call here, where are you in design? You don't want to get money before you know the full scope of the project. So you want to be mindful of a lot of those variables, but also not taking a lot of interest rate risk where rates are really good so you want to take advantage if you can. So to answer your question, you can be soup to nuts through the process of figuring out if it's going to be a bank loan or if there's grant funding, or if it's going full-blown public issuance where you get a rating and bond insurance. That's a 60 to 90 day process before you have cash in hand.
Okay. Natalie.
The good thing about Scott Kramer's money is there's no strings attached. We love that. So I think that's worth repeating that, no offense to our Penvest and our US folks. Sorry, Dave, but it's nice to bid a project and not have, a bunch of special conditions and things that will potentially raise the price of construction. So, we can't always afford it. And I mean, honestly, Penvest shows some really attractive 1% interest rates. So sometimes you can't beat that. But if you're looking to do something quickly and not have a lot of requirements to meet, then the bond market is great. And refinancing right now is great too. I know Scott has refinanced a number of our clients' debt right now.
Okay,
Yes, so
Scott.
I appreciate the no strings attached, but to be clear, if you're going to go through the public issuance process, there are certain hoops that you'll need to jump through. There's the rating process, whatever your bond documents, part of working with, whether it's a financial advisor or an investment banker, making sure you put a document set in place that gives you the most flexibility, so that 10 years from now you're not handcuffed by your document set. You want to be sitting with the most flexibility so that you can do the other things if you need to. So I know there's other folks that want to jump in here.
Scott Graver, you had a comment?
Yeah,
That's why it's
I have
phones
to
ring off.
comment. Natalie said there was no strings attached, and then Scott, said there is some, but I found out that the strings attached to mine, I was educated by our solicitor. So our project is so long in length that we have time to put the money. We got the money at a great interest rate, like 6 months ago or something like that. So I needed to put it in a depositories. And my solicitor told me I can't make more money than what I'm paying on interest for the bond. So I
called
said, "Geez,
arbitrage."
I wouldn't mind being guilty of that. So that was something I I was unaware of, but I came darn close to that.
Mike?
Yes, Scott, it's called arbitrage.
That's right.
And counter to Natalie's, the only thing I counter Natalie with is she's right. If you can get an interest rate from Scott Kramer, fantastic. The only thing that would counter that, the hoops, would be if you can get a grant from the federal or state government. If you can get a RUS grant, something like Kurt got, or a grant from Penvest, sometimes it's worth going through the hoops.
Yeah,
Tommy?
absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Natalie, and then we'll hit Tommy. Go ahead, Natalie.
I was just going to say, yeah, that your median household income is usually a number that everybody likes to know about, and what your existing user rates are. So if you ever are, exploring these possibilities, that's a good number to know. What your median household income is for your municipality.
Okay, Tommy.
Yeah, basically, if someone's doing a major infrastructure project, you first look at either, the bond market or you go to your state agency like Penvest and look into an SRF loan, or if it's a project of at least $20 million, you would look into WIFIA. In years past, though, to look at all federal grants available, I would steer people to the catalog of federal domestic assistance, but I just took a quick look for that, and it is being revamped by GSA. So it's a little more confusing to use now. One idea, though, is to go to EPA program areas. Say if you're interested in replacing lead service lines and you would like, a grant of some kind, go into the EPA's lead and drinking water pages, and there might be links there to potential assistance. But what we always suggest to people is develop a relationship first with your state primacy agencies. They know where to look. If they don't have the funds themselves, they might know where to look, or even maybe a regional EPA office.
Okay, Tori?
So just to kind of piggyback on what Tommy just said. So, when our bulletin board, which I'm super excited, goes live, we have links to many of those web pages where you'll find those specific grant programs and information on them. In fact, Penvest has one specific to lead line replacement and initiatives and grant opportunities. So that's good. And so does Pennsylvania DCED grant programs and fundings. They have a very detailed, so it's great to go to those websites, and we'll make sure and provide those websites to everybody too, so that you have easy access.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, go ahead, Scott Kramer.
So I'm just following up on Scott Graver. We talked a little bit about interest rates. I would say in a lot of cases, it's more about the structure of the debt than it is, rate is important, but for a lot of the folks that are, I'm sure, listening, are going to talk about, how do I pay for this project? How do I afford the debt service? And so Penvest at a 20-year level debt may not work because you're trying to amortize the debt over 20 years. RUS longer at 40 years. So just like your home mortgage, if you take out a 10-year mortgage, it's going to come with a higher payment versus a 30-year mortgage. So a lot of, your advisor will show you what the best structure may be. Maybe it's refinancing, wrapping new debt around existing debt, restructuring to make room for the new debt to come online over a period of years so that you're not jumping in with both feet up front with a full debt load. There's a lot of things that you can massage, and we do a lot of this up in Schuylkill County with you guys, where $1 million, $2 million projects are a big number for some folks, and it's the challenge is to try, how do we pay for it? And so it's not just getting the best rate, it's what's the best structure. And certainly to Mike's point, free money is the best money. We like that a lot.
Good point. Hey, another question from our audience. This is from Michael Manichak. He's tuned into a bunch of our roundtables, so thank you for joining us again. He asked, what rates has the panel been seeing for municipal bond funding? So anyone anyone look recently? Scott Kramer?
Yeah, so I don't want to speak to the RUS rates because they're changing in the Penvest rates, but the bank market, we're seeing for smaller transactions, we're seeing stuff as low as 1.5% for a 10-year fixed rate. The banks generally are in that 5 to 10-year sweet spot. Longer than that, you're going to go to the bond market, but 30-year bond rates are in the 2%-ish, all in fixed for 30 years. So rates are really, really low on that side, but I'll let the others speak to the program rates.
Yeah, anyone else have a sense of where it is right now?
RUS is somewhere, and I haven't looked at it lately, it's somewhere in the twos also.
Okay.
And that changes quarterly. RUS reviews quarterly. So if you have an interest rate was set October 1st, that's good till December 31st. And then come December 31st, they review the rates again. And sometimes they go down, sometimes they stay the same. It just, again, depends on the market.
Okay. Any other comments on that question? Okay, Dave?
Yeah, in the Penvest interest rates, they also change quarterly, but right now our rates are hovering between like 1 to maybe 2.25%. So
Okay.
all-time low for us.
Okay, excellent. Here's an interesting question from the audience. And again, thank you, audience. Questions are pouring in. I love being able to address your needs. So This is from Heath Edelman, and he asks, are you seeing more stormwater or watershed projects being funded? So Dave, I see you nodding already.
Yeah, I mean, with Penvest, that's probably the biggest uptick in projects right now are agricultural best management practices, urban, conventional stormwater, and there's a lot of cities that are doing right now in conjunction with trying to eliminate CSOs, SSOs, those kinds of things. They're also doing stormwater that maybe contribute to, the sanitary sewer system. So yeah, that's where we're seeing a lot of interest in.
Natalie, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, we're seeing some stormwater projects, but it's not from a good thing. It's from the flooding of August of 2018. Those projects, some of them, the FEMA funding is still coming through. So we're finally getting to construction on a bunch of those, and people that live in the Pottsville area know that there's been a hole in the road and a detour through the giant parking lot for years now. So
that's from 20. Oh my God.
From August 2018. So I have I believe 3 some are stream banks, but one is stormwater, and it's just finally coming to fruition. So FEMA grant money, I mean, I hate for anybody to have to go through a disaster once a storm is declared a disaster, but if it is, it's well worth the time and effort to get that money back. And Scott Graver went through it a few times last time with me, and we got funding back for playgrounds, the soccer field, equipment. What else, Scott, was there?
Good question. Because it takes so long. Well, our labor to respond to the flood,
Yes.
emergency services, that's a big part. Any pump details that was out there, and anything that was destroyed by the flood.
Okay. Do you know what? We've got a bunch of questions from the audience, so I want to keep moving through those. Here's a good one tied in with that last one. Can funding be pursued for multiple project needs? Say you've got water, you've got sewer, you've got stormwater. Can all of that be lumped into one grant? Scott, you're smiling. Scott Graver, why are you smiling?
Well, I would caution, maybe with, your Penvest or your RUS, but I would caution with any of the DCED application funds that are out there, that would make it problematic and confusing to the grant reviewer. But certainly RUS or Penvest, might be look favorably on something like that.
Mike?
RUS would probably take 2 applications, one for water, one for stormwater, especially if you're getting grant funding, because the grant, there's a lot of factors that go with grant determination, and one of it is user rates. So you're going to look at, the water, the sewer user rate and the water user rate. So you probably get 2 separate. If you're doing stormwater, there's no grant with RUS for stormwater.
Okay. Natalie?
Yeah, Penvest was the same way. That was one of my first projects. It was a business park, and they had to do water lines and sewer lines to get the business park up and running, and it was 2 different loans. So 2 different applications.
Scott Kramer?
So from our side of the house, it really depends on who the issuer is and the structure. So if it's a borough, Scott Graver can issue general obligation debt for water and sewer. If it's an operating authority that maybe has PUC issues, it's going to be specifically, for the water or sewer project. We do see a lot more issuers trying to find a way to do as much as they can at one time under one financing to gain the economies. But it really comes down to what the structure is, whether you have an operating authority, a leaseback authority, or the incorporating municipality, township, or borough issuing the debt. Depends.
Okay. Tori?
I was going to take that down just a slightly different avenue and say, you know, sometimes it's hard to manage, like you had said, there are two different loans or grants, Natalie, or applications rather. But, you know, another tip that people should think about, and they don't normally think about, is if there's any way with maybe a neighboring municipality that might be having a similar issue, whether it be related to stormwater or flood mitigation or anything like that, if it's a regional project, oh my goodness, the state and the federal government, they love regional, you know, bring it together. And that is definitely, that will grab attention. So if it is a project big enough that you can work with your neighboring municipality or another partner in something, that definitely pushes you up on that list when being considered for a grant. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. I mean, I know sometimes we all tend to work in a vacuum and, you know, we're looking specifically at one thing, but sometimes if you can step outside that box a little bit and realize, well, maybe I can work with this other partner on this particular project, your chances of getting that grant might be increased. So just something to think about.
Tommy, I see you nodding your head. Can you speak
Yeah,
to why a
and
regional
also,
project gets funding?
yeah, I know in the instance of WIFIA, they are, and many other federal loan programs are looking for projects of regional significance or national significance. And another factor, and I think someone else alluded to this earlier, they look at who's paying back the loan. You want to make sure they're looking at which customer base is paying back which parts of the project. So they really like to have the same customer base paying back everything. But yeah, if your project has regional or national significance, that's a big leg up in a federal application.
Okay. Mike.
A little bit on more what Tommy said. You like to separate the water and the sewer only because the water should be paying for itself. The sewer should be paying for itself. The water should not be subsidizing. You know, if you have a successful water system and a sewer system that's financially just making it, the water should not be subsidizing the sewer. It's just bad business to do either one, do that. So that's another reason why RUS likes to keep it separate.
Any other comments on this? Dave?
Yeah, just one comment for the group. And yeah, I think like the way Natalie explained it, if you're looking to do a drinking water and a stormwater project, that would definitely be 2 applications. But one new program we just recently implemented was called a programmatic funding program. And essentially what it allows a community to do, if they have a like a 5-year capital improvement plan that's, you know, that they have adopted, what they could do is they could come in and fund 3 years worth of projects through this programmatic financing program. What it allows them to do is obviously come in for a much larger amount, but then help to alleviate some of the costs of, you know, submitting another Penvest application for each project. And we originally had envisioned that it might be you know, a good program for maybe some of the larger systems, but what we're actually finding out is that a lot of people were interested in that program that maybe have like a you know, a medium-sized system, and where it just doesn't make sense to do, you know, 4 or 5 like small project applications through Penvest. So just wanted to throw that out there. I know it's not directly answering the question that you raised, but I just wanted to mention that.
Other comments? Okay, another good question from our audience. Keep them rolling in. Do you have any information about the start times of these grants? She had looked into one back in October last year and the grant money was gone. So like, are there certain ones that follow a time frame, like every year they become available, or what do you see out there? Give us some insight. Dave, can you give us some insight?
That's actually a really great question, and I could probably spend 10 minutes just answering that, but I'll condense it.
30 seconds.
I'll condense it to 30 seconds. So my recommendation is that, I mean, there's programs that come to us all the time that we get very to little leeway as far as trying to develop projects for. But probably the best thing to do, quite honestly, is get your projects designed, get them ready to go, and even get them permitted if at all possible. And if there's not a good source of funding for the project at that time, just simply put it on the shelf when something becomes readily available. The one thing that I think a lot of programs honestly look for, and I hate this term, but are shovel-ready projects. Not projects that are sketched on a bar napkin that you want to get funding for. If you can show them that you have something ready to go, a lot of times that'll open up a whole lot of doors for you.
Other comments on that? Mike?
RUS, there's no time limits. It's a total 12-month-a-year process. You can apply anytime. The catch with RUS is funding availability. Congress allots X amount of dollars per year, and that's divided up among the states depending on rural population. Pennsylvania is lucky. I think Pennsylvania is like the second or third largest rural population in the country. So thus they get a bigger allotment of funds. And so that's the only catch with RUS is you got to catch it with, make sure that the funding is there, but it's a year-round process. And I expect this coming next 4 years, there's probably going to be more funding. That's usually, in my career with RUS, I've seen when one party's in, there's always a lot of funding. When the other party's in, the funding is cut back some.
Okay. Well, and that's a perfect segue. Tommy, I've been dying to hear from you. Give us an update. We just had an election a couple of weeks ago, looking at a change. So what are you seeing out there?
Well, and some things are still in limbo, but you can point to some things that you think might happen. I think, unfortunately, because we are in an economic recession here, Congress and the president are going to be looking to find ways to stimulate the economy and create jobs. That's good for, water infrastructure. We've been preaching the need for the nation to reinvest in its water infrastructure for years now. And people accept that, but you got to come up with the money. So, we're cautiously, I hate this phrase, cautiously optimistic that there might be more money in the coming year to help the country get out of this economic situation. We've pointed out that, every dollar invested in water infrastructure results in $3.6 growth in GDP, and every job created in the water sector creates 4 to 5 jobs elsewhere in the economy. And the need, there's kind of a knee-jerk feeling that, well, if Democrats are in power, we're going to have more regulation, but more money for infrastructure. And if Republicans are in power, we'll have no regulations and no money for infrastructure. In truth, it's a matter of degrees. As far as regulation goes, yes, a lot of Democrats want to see stricter regulations come out for like PFAS. And that's probably going to happen. But actually, some Republicans do too. There are some key Republicans with PFAS in their districts or states that want to see that regulated more strictly. And there are Republicans who want to see, economic growth and jobs restored. So how they'll do it is kind of hard. The good news is we have some existing tools to help with that. We have the SRF program and we have WIFIA. One thing we've got to watch is whenever the tax code is being debated, people on the Hill like to say everything's on the table, and that includes tax-exempt municipal bonds. So every time they put the tax code on the table, a bunch of us representing local government and utilities are up on the Hill saying, don't touch tax-exempt municipal bonds. Now, in the 2017 tax overhaul, we did lose the tax advantages to advance refunding. And AWWA has been part of a group trying to get that back. So maybe we'll get that back next go around. I don't know, no promises. But I think we will see some more money in the SRF and hopefully WIFIA program. The question is, will there be more grant money? I don't know. The federal debt has gotten so huge. I think you're going to get pushback for grant programs. Will we see more money for these loan programs? I think so, because they are loan programs, especially WIFI is strictly a loan program. There's no grant, no principal forgiveness, anything like that. Another question is, will they come up with new vehicles for investing in infrastructure? You remember in the 2008 recession, they created Build America bonds, and those were only in existence for a few years. I haven't heard any discussion of that, but once the new administration and the new Congress gets seated, who knows? I don't know. There were some administrative problems with those, but this will be a time for us all to try and get creative. But I think right now the thing is to look at those existing tools, the SRF and WIFIA.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that update. Natalie?
Yeah, Tommy, do you see another kind of ARA? I think all of us on this call would probably remember the ARA funds and how.
What were the ARA funds and when was that?
Oh boy, America Resource and Recovery Act. Do I have that right?
I think so. It's been 10 years, 8
10
years.
years ago.
No, wait, it's 2008, 12.
12 years ago, there was money everywhere, and we were all so very busy, and we're trying to, put our projects to fit any way we could. And Penvest was, I know, totally overloaded with applications because they took the permits in hand requirement off of their application. So we love that, right, Dave? So do you see an arrow-like thing coming back, Tommy?
That's possible. That's possible, but it may be, and I forgot to get into this, pandemic relief legislation. We had the CARES Act come into law last spring. Now, unfortunately, in the CARES Act, if there was aid to local, the good news was there was aid to local and state government. The bad news was there was a clause in there that said these funds cannot be used to offset lost utility revenues. But there was an exception carved out for electrical utilities. And that I've heard rumors about where that came from. It was the administration wanting to punish Democratic cities, but I got that secondhand, so that's not gospel. The House passed the HEROES Act in May. The good news in there was $1.5 billion to help low-income water customers pay their bills, channeled through the utility, kind of like LIHEAP has done with the electrical, on the electrical side. The bad news was, I won't say bad news, the catch was it was tied to a moratorium on disconnections for non-payment of water service. Now, frankly, every water utility I've talked to or has stopped cutting off customers because of a public health emergency, or the state or the local government has done that. The problem was the HEROES Act has 2 or 3 different definitions of a public health emergency. And there was a provision in there that if a local government took any money from that act, even if it didn't go to the water department, the moratorium place. In addition, the definition of public health emergency was open-ended. It could be any public emergency. And you might remember the AIDS public health emergency went on for years. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that's just what could happen. So we have some problems there. We also have been trying to find money to help utilities suffer significant revenue losses. I know not every utility has, but I have heard from a handful who are in dire straits with regard to operating funds. I mean, now, so like say you're a medium-sized town with a large college, well, and the college is not fully opened. Well, you've probably seen significant revenue losses, or a medium-sized community dependent on 1 or 2 industries that have gone into recession. You're probably hurting as well yourself, or your biggest, I've heard from one suburb, their biggest customer is the school district. So they're going to be in trouble. But there's no money in there specifically for water utilities. So, we've written Congress, we've written the administration and say, we do want to see money go to those low income customers who are having trouble paying their water bills. And we want to see assistance come to water utilities that have suffered significant revenue losses. And we want a definite definition of the public. If you're going to have a moratorium on disconnections, we want a hard definition of what the time period is. It could be, we'd like it to say this COVID emergency plus 60 days, or a reasonable amount of 90 days, whatever you want to have it. But it needs to be defined, what the public health emergency is.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Tommy. That sort of ties in with another question from our audience. This is from Diane, and she says, we applied for H2O Pennsylvania grants 3 years in a row with no elected official support. Is it possible to get grant funding without local elected official support? So that's something I always wonder, the politics of all this and who you know. So Scott Graver, who do you know? What do you do?
Uh, I just recently got turned down for our big project through the H2O funding myself. And I was optimistic that they would throw some crumbs my way, but they didn't. And I had, legislative support. We always have legislative support, but quite honestly, it's probably about 9 out of 10 times you put an application and you're not going to get funded. That's probably a good number, right, Natalie?
Wait, really? 1 out of 10? That's all you get? Because that's horrible odds, isn't it, Natalie?
The H2O money, the CFA money is hard to get. I like the CFA money. The application isn't difficult. The reimbursements are easy. That's all great. Legislative support is important. But I'll go back. I just ended up getting over $1 million for a wastewater interceptor line because we were regionalizing, Tori. So I think that had a big thing to do with that as well. So again, look at the grant guidelines, look and see what buzzwords they have in those grants and exactly what they're looking for. When we submitted that, they were giving out 50% of the money was to go to regionalization projects. So we took advantage of that and put our application in at that time. But it's not so hard to resubmit a H2O or a CFA grant. So we keep them from year to year and we keep trying, right, Scott?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure do.
So Natalie,
We don't give up.
No,
Natalie,
we've been lucky. We've been luckier on this CFA grant, the DCED small water and wastewater, but we submitted 4 applications this past go around. We were approved for 1. We did have legislative support on all of them. Big issue there is getting the local municipal officials and the residents involved, write the state senator and the state rep, make your needs known and somewhat stay in their face.
Okay, so it's not just like, in my mind, it was just, I'm like, oh, so like the guy in charge of the authority, the executive director, he's the one who talks to the legislator. No, it sounds like it's the constituents, it's actually the residents who need to be, you need to have
more
them on
people they
board.
hear from, the better.
Okay.
Our votes.
Okay, yep. Oh, I mean, I know this is all political, so like this was a big question for me, just wondering, do you have to know your reps and be in touch with them? Do you have to donate money to them? Like what helps you get these funds? Scott Gravy, you're smiling. You don't have to say anything. Tori, you have something to share?
I wouldn't say you have to donate money. That's starting to cross some lines there for sure. Scares me a little bit. My hair just went up on my back of my neck.
Edit the video.
I
Edit the
think,
video. Go ahead.
I think what's important is those legislative support letters and having those conversations with your legislators. When it comes to grants and funding, it's not just about filling out the paperwork. It's about communication. You have to be talking with people. You can't just go online, look it up, fill out the papers and send it in. I can't emphasize enough. If there's a contact person for that grant or in that department, somebody like Dave Henning, you'll call these people up, talk with them. They're going to share experiences and stories with you, and they're going to help you through the process, or at least give you some indication on what will work and what won't work. So don't reinvent the wheel. And when it comes to your legislators, you just call them up and say, hey, I'd love to get together with you or talk with you on a Zoom call for some potential projects that we're looking at for this particular community. Is there support that you can provide to us? Do you know anything about this? Do you have any input, or can you make suggestions to somebody, within the legislative body that we should be talking to? But you need to make those calls. It's crucial. Really, it really is. Because remember, there's so many people looking for the same money.
Yeah, Scott Graver.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it, the people, the panelists or any of the participants here think it's impossible. Maybe I went to the well too often, because 8 years ago, I did receive one grant that was well over $1 million through the H2O program. and that was significant. So, maybe it's about sharing the wealth too.
Mhm.
And
Good
so-
point. Yeah, so still have some questions coming in from our audience. See, we've got about 5 minutes left. So what we'll do is hit a few questions. I'll do a wrap up, but if the panelists are still here, we'll just keep going with the questions. So this feels like something we could talk about for hours. So this question was from Jerry Theobald, and he asks, does anyone have experience in adding solar generation at a treatment plant and possible funding for that sort of project? Anyone come across anything like that or get money for that? Dave?
Well, it's certainly an eligible activity through the Penvest program. We typically wouldn't fund just the construction, say, of solar arrays, but if you were doing, say, like a water treatment plant or a wastewater treatment plant improvement project, and you were, in addition, you wanted to install some solar arrays to maybe help lower your electrical consumption, that's certainly an eligible cost. And quite honestly, you would get additional priority through our program by doing that, because there is a green component to how we rank projects. So definitely something eligible through Penvest.
Okay, Natalie?
Yeah, I was going to say the green infrastructure, you get points on your Penvest application, which is great. I would also check, I always go to the DCED website, and they have like a find funding for my project. I forget exactly what it's called, but it asks you a few questions, and then you can kind of search through and see what all is out there, because things are coming in and out all the time. Deadlines aren't always, April and October. They kind of just, whenever programs open and close, things happen all the time. So definitely just keep checking that DCED website. They have a lot there, but Penvest is definitely an eligible funding for, they can fund that type of program. Yeah.
Okay. Michael?
And RUS, to go along with Dave, RUS would do the same thing as if you made a part of the project. I don't think they would do it separately. Actually, I didn't work on this project, but there was one in Milton where I think they used the methane gas from the treatment plant to produce electricity.
Very cool. My my great grandparents are from Milton. I was there last year and touring the city. Another question from our audience, and actually this is one that we already answered, is funding available for tools and equipment, like for finding I&I, and it seemed like identifying the projects, that sort of help isn't. It's more for fixing the things. So I think we addressed that already. And another question from Michael Keffer: will funding institutions assist utilities by awarding funds for legal services to recover damages from facilities that must invest to remove PFAS pollutants in the water supply?
Go ahead, Natalie, it's all you.
I mean, I can say Penvest funds, they will reimburse you for legal costs associated with projects. So I do know that. And if it's a disaster, if it's somehow declared a disaster, FEMA and PEMA would reimburse you for legal fees as well. So that's all I know about that stuff right now. I'm looking for myself more opportunities for the PFAS as well. So, but we did just get one approved, I believe, with Penvest. So that's what we're using.
Okay, thank you. And I see we're up at 3:15 right now. So there's still a few questions from the audience. If the panel is available and you can stick around, we'll hit those questions. But I did want to give a shout out to the audience of, if you enjoyed yourself today, we do have 2 more roundtables scheduled. And these have been so successful and so fun. We'll be scheduling them into 2021. So next 2 coming up are on I&I and have a beer with an engineer. Old timers share what I tell my 21-year-old self. So, and we will have a beer. So that one's going to be a lot of fun. you can get credits from the DEP. Shh. One other thing, if you're interested in signing up for those, go to our website, entecheng.com. The lower right has the Roundtable recast. That's where you can register and take a look at our videos. So huge thank you to our panel, folks from Entech, Tori Morgan, Natalie O'Connor, Michael Angerson, and our guests and friends, Dave Henning. So interesting to get your insight about Penvest, Scott Graver and Kurt Fontaine. Love hearing from the utilities and understanding what you guys are up against. Tommy Holmes from AWWA, thank you. Scott Kramer, good to understand the funding a little bit better and the financing that you can do for people. So I will leave this up for a couple minutes, but panel, I'd love to keep hearing from you guys. Question for Kurt. Do you yourself actually speak with the legislators?
Yes. Whenever we have projects coming up, very often I meet with them in person. Sometimes
so you meet in
walk the
person.
project site.
Because there's something about the touch and feel. So you think that really helps?
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, whenever they're out there, they like to get out and they like to mix with their constituents also. For instance, I had one of the legislators call me recently and asked me to meet him in the field. We went out, took a look at a proposed project site, and now we're waiting for some funding to become available to make application.
Okay, excellent. Oh, and one other thing for the viewers, I mentioned if you're interested in getting a PDH certificate or an operator CEH, this is my email address. Please send me an email with your information and I'll make sure you get these items for helping us out with our panel and tuning in. Comment from Missy Dando at Entech. She mentions Natalie, in addition to DCED grants, DECD grants.gov is the federal side of where grants are listed. Sign up for emails with each for grant announcements. So Natalie, did you have experience with that?
I didn't actually. I didn't know about grants.gov, but I guess that's why I have Missy working next to me, and she tells me and forwards me those announcements. So yeah, we all work together and share our knowledge, so it's all good. And once Tori gets that bulletin board up, we're gonna be set. I'm excited.
I'm planting it on the board today, so grants.gov.
Yeah, and actually, anyone who tuned in today, we will make sure you get a link to that bulletin board once it's live and available for your use. Another question from the audience regarding funding for solar projects. The DEP used to have the Energy Harvest Grant Program, which may still be available for that type of project. Anyone familiar with that? Okay, but it's something our audience can check out if they're interested. So that takes care of all of our questions from the audience. Any final comments, thoughts, or ideas, or anything that the panel did? Well, sounds like we need to have another one of these because I have a list of a dozen questions I never even got to.
I have one other suggestion. Look in unexpected places for funding too. One more acronym to add to your list would be BAMR, Bureau of Abandoned Mines and Reclamations. We've done a lot of projects where we've gone to them, where you've had areas that have been affected by acid mine drainage, the groundwater the groundwater aquifer, and they've actually chipped in the materials, the cost of the materials. Now they've done the pipe, the fittings, but not the hydrants. Okay, but anything that will actually bring clean water, potable water to the residents that have been adversely impacted by underground mining.
Interesting. Any other things we haven't talked about or secret places to get money? Anyone know? Or you don't want to give away your secrets? You shouldn't have said that, Kurt.
Well, it's there. may not always be available, but we've been successful on that at least, I believe, 3 times.
And I'll throw out one
Tori?
that is, it doesn't happen. It's kind of hard, but it's a long shot, but certainly worth, because I don't think the application is too difficult, but the casino's money. Sometimes if you are in close proximity to one of the major casinos and you can show that there's been an impact to your system or, upgrades needed to your system because of that, there is casinos money available, and sometimes you can get it. You have to be pretty crafty at writing those applications, though. I'll tell you that.
Okay, Natalie?
Yeah, one thing we didn't really talk about was like the local grants. So be sure to keep an eye out for the local. We've been successful with a lot of CDBG, community development block grants. And you know, if you just need a small project done, those types of, that program is excellent for that as well. So you don't always have to think big. I know we talked about go big or go home, but you don't always have to. If you have something small, there's programs out there as well.
Good point. Any other final comments, final thoughts? Okay, well, huge thank you to our panelists. Thank you. Your knowledge, your stories, your insights, so helpful. I know I learned a lot. Thank you to our viewers. I didn't even have to go to my question list. Your questions were phenomenal and hit on a bunch of different aspects of finding funding for your projects. And I always end these by saying magical things happen when you bring together passionate people. So thank you all. Very passionate about this. I loved it. And we will see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.